where I heard a voice in my right ear. The voice said, "You shouldn't be here." And that moment, everything went black. I remember being in this infinite void, infinite darkness. I didn't question at the time what was happening because it happened so fast. I just found myself in this endless empty room. And a moment later, I felt the most excruciating pain. This vehicle had shot straight through, hit me head on. I was actually laid on the other side of the road. My body was in a terrible mess, without going into too much detail. People were surrounding me, and there was quite a panic to contact the emergency services and also apprehend the person that was trying to drive off away from the scene. I was rushed to hospital, and it was one of the most painful rides I've ever experienced in my life. And at some point, I was rushed into a major operation, and I was in more than two at the time, just to stem the body's damage, ultimately trying to stabilise. During this experience, I found myself in a corridor. Previously, I remember being in tremendous pain. I couldn't move my legs. They were completely broken. Yet, I was standing again. I was confused as I stood in the hallway. Something seemed wrong. For one thing, I could stand again. But reality didn't seem the way that I previously knew. It looked like the world that I knew, but it just seemed odd. The colours weren't quite the colours that I knew. Everything seemed to be solid, but not quite. It's as if it was like solid light. I was so young then, I just went with it, assumed it maybe was a dream. I tried to wave at the nurses that were walking down this corridor. I then realised that I was in the paediatric ward as I walked to one opening and saw a child sat in the bed. He had casts on. I remember his particular features, and I waved to him, and I didn't realise that he couldn't see me. I thought, this is strange, this doesn't feel right. I walked to the next room and saw another kid in there. Kid couldn't see me. I waved at the doctor that passed by me, walked straight by me. It just got stranger and stranger, so I continued this walk down the corridor. I walked from room to room, and it's at this point I realised that everything was hyper detailed. I could see every crack in the wall, every piece of discarded rubbish left on the ground. I could see doctors' coats hanging on the walls, various different medicinal products, I suppose. It was just very strange because I felt like I was invisible, basically. I eventually got to the end of this corridor. I went left, I went right, and eventually I discovered this empty room. And there was this large door with a glass window. And I could see through this that there were these large holes in the wall to the right, all the way up to the ceiling. They had these openings, these doors, and various metal instruments on the inside. To the left I saw these cabinets, doctors' coats still, but something about this room felt odd. And the best way I can describe it is encountering the infinite. There was something in there that I physically couldn't see, but it was there, and it was vast, and it was massive. It was like a paradox, like time folding into itself. And as I tried to walk away from this room, I felt like I was being sucked in, like it was a black hole, like gravity shifted. Time seemed to slow, things seemed to deteriorate around me, and I don't know what happened, whether it invited me in, I walked into it, I just don't know, but I seemed to maybe merge with something that was there. I was thrust all over the universe. It was like a videotape being played fast forward, basically. Everything was zooming by. I could see planets, I could see cities, I could see strange people that I didn't recognise. I could see different times, and one particular point in this experience, I found that I was flying. I was flying through the sky and gradually landed on this walkway. And as I landed on the walkway, I could see the vast landscape that was beneath me. This walkway was over this lake, and around this lake was this train yard. It was like the lake had these steps that went up to this train yard, up to a higher bridge that went over it. It was a really bizarre looking sight. And when I landed, these people were on the bridge, and it was like they turned around and jumped. It's like they could almost see me for a moment. And it's that point where I was thrust back towards the hospital, where I met this entity again, and I don't know what happened. It was like a download, I suppose, is the best way to describe it. It was like I was being force-fed all this information, and this thing, I realised it was so vast and so beyond my comprehension. I didn't know what it was, and the more it downloaded into me, the more I realised that I knew this thing. It had met me before. It was like this thing that had always been there, like an ancient god of some sort, I suppose. I mean, I've even referred to it as a demon at times because it was so scary. And the knowledge it gave me is this oneness with everything, this interconnectedness of the universe, that I was no longer me and I was we and us, basically. And this concept to a small child was overwhelming. My brain wasn't quite fully developed at the time to fully understand what was going on. And it's at this point where I entered this state of sheer panic because the download was getting faster and faster and faster and faster. I felt like I was burning at that point. It was sheer and utter terror. And the terror was really, I believe it was down to my lack of understanding of the situation, really. I don't believe this thing was evil, but it was something, and it was incredible. Eventually I screamed out for my mother. It was the only thing I could think of that reminded me of home, of safety. And I was thrust back into my body.